Shirley Temple, the little girl with curly hair and a radiant smile who once captivated the entire world, seemed to have lived a perfect life as an adult. But behind that dazzling glow was a woman who endured the hell of marriage, betrayal, and emotional scars no one could have imagined. When secret FBI files were declassified after her death, the public was shocked to discover that the image of Hollywood's little angel was merely a facade hiding a very dark truth. Before we dive deeper, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Grab yourself a warm drink, maybe a cup of tea or just some water, and sit back as we begin this journey together. The real story of Shirley Temple is far more intense and complex than any movie she ever starred in. Shirley Jane Temple, born April 23rd, 1,928 inches, Santa Monica, California. Few would have guessed that behind that radiant appearance was a childhood filled with control, exploitation, and trauma. At the age of 3, Temple was taken to a film set for the first time to participate in a series of short films called Baby Burlesques, 1,931. This was nominally a cute comedy series that imitated adults with children. In Baby Burlesques, children as young as a few years old had to transform into adult characters, wear provocative costumes, and act out emotional scenes they themselves did not understand. In the episode Politics in Washington, Shirley was cast as a seductress. She entered a senator's office wearing a tiny bra, a string of pearls, swaying her hips, and kissing him on the lips, all under the camera lights, and the voice of director Charles Lamont. He was the one who discovered Temple, signed her first contract, and also the one who made her pay for that reputation with dark childhood years. The following scenes were no better. In War Babies, Temple once again played a little girl trying to charm soldiers, all of whom were children like her. The suggestive scenes, the candy for kiss exchanges, and the self-referential lines about being expensive would make today's audiences shudder. But back then, Hollywood called it comedy. There were no child protection laws on film sets. According to historian John Casson, when a child disobeyed, director Charles Lamont would punish them by locking them inside a soundproof black box with a large block of ice. The children were forced to sit on it in silence, trembling from cold and fear. Lamont warned them that if they told their parents, the punishment would be even worse. Shirley Temple once tried to tell her mother, but Gertrude Temple, who saw her daughter as a ticket to a better life, refused to believe her. Gertrude had been a failed ballet dancer. When she realised Shirley had golden curls, rosy cheeks, and a $1,000,000 smile, she saw in her the second chance she'd lost. From then on, Temple was no longer a child in her mother's eyes, but a star in the making. Gertrude curled her daughter's hair every day, taught her how to smile, how to bow, and forced her to memorise every line. Shirley soon learned that as long as she smiled at the right moment, everyone would be pleased, even if she was terrified inside. Years later, in her memoir, Child Star, Shirley Temple wrote it all down. I was just a child who didn't understand what I was doing, but the world thought it was delightful. She called Baby Burlesques a shameless exploitation of our childhood, a statement that forced America to re-examine the so-called golden age of Hollywood, where children's smiles were bought with tears. In 1934, she skyrocketed to international fame with the film Bright Eyes. For 3 consecutive years, Shirley Temple even dethroned Clark Gable to become the world's top box office star. But as we'll see, behind that dazzling fame was a childhood that had been stolen. By the 1940s, her glow began to fade. New films no longer drew crowds to theatres. After 2 box office flops, 20th Century Fox coldly ended her contract. Shirley was only 12, an age when most girls still played with dolls. Yet, she was forced to think about contracts, reputation, and unemployment. She later moved to MGM, a studio notorious for its strict discipline and relentless shooting schedules, often referred to as a childhood crusher for young stars. On her very first day at MGM, Temple faced a nightmare she would never forget. She was scheduled to meet privately with the powerful producer Arthur Freed, known for launching the careers of many Hollywood icons. But the meeting quickly turned horrific. In her autobiography, Shirley recalled that Freed abruptly unzipped his pants and said, "I've got something special for you." The young girl, confused and terrified, could only respond with an awkward laugh, a reflex born from fear and innocence. Moments later, he coldly dismissed her, as if nothing had happened. It was not just a moment of trauma, but the first emotional scar of many. Years later, in an interview with Larry King, Temple admitted that this incident led her to leave MGM after only one film. Her words were brief but bitter. "That was when I knew Hollywood was no place for children." But Hollywood itself wasn't the only threat. Outside the studios, Shirley Temple became a target for disturbed adults hiding behind fame and intellect. Among them was the British novelist Graham Greene, one of the most acclaimed writers of the 20th century. In his review of Captain January 1936, he disturbingly described the neat little rump of the child as she wriggled in her tap dance, and in another review for Wee Willie Winkie, Greene went even further, calling Temple a complete little tart, implying she was a seductive woman trapped in a child's body. Those perverse words sparked outrage across Hollywood. Temple and 20th Century Fox sued Graham Greene for legal and won. The compensation money was placed in a trust fund until she turned 21. Yet, when the time came, Temple didn't keep a cent. She donated the entire sum to build a youth centre, a place where children could play and learn without having to sacrifice their childhood as she had. It was an act that revealed who Shirley Temple truly was. Kind, dignified, and resilient in a ruthless Hollywood, she managed to preserve her innocence and compassion, refusing to let the darkness consume her. But fate still wasn't done testing her. As Shirley Temple grew older, she found herself facing rumours so absurd that even she couldn't help but laugh. One of the most widespread, which swept across the US and eventually Europe, claimed that Shirley Temple wasn't actually a child at all. According to the rumour, she was a fully grown dwarf, disguised as a little girl, deceiving audiences and the media alike. The story spread so wildly that it caught the attention of the Vatican. In her memoir, Temple recounted that Father Silvio Massanti, a representative of the Holy See, was sent to investigate. The solemn priest arrived at her home, requesting a private meeting and asking bizarre questions. What year she was born, whether she had a birth certificate, and if anyone could verify that she was in fact a real child. At first, the Temple family thought it was a joke, but it wasn't. The priest carried official authorization from the Vatican itself. When the news broke, the public was both astonished and amused. It revealed a deep-seated mistrust of Hollywood, a world where illusion was so pervasive that even a child's innocence could be doubted. Temple later called it the strangest rumour of my life, but said she wasn't angry. "I understood," she wrote. When people are surrounded by make-believe for too long, they start to doubt what's real. Father Massanti explained that the rumour had spread throughout Europe, with many convinced that Temple's fame was due to her being a 30-year-old woman pretending to be a child. Some even presented evidence. A few claimed she had adult teeth, since none of her baby teeth ever seemed to fall out, while others insisted her teeth had been filed down to look smaller. The truth, of course, was much simpler. Temple explained that she had lost her baby teeth, but wore caps and partial dentures during filming to cover the gaps, which kept her signature smile flawless on screen. Yet, this wasn't the only mystery fans tried to unravel. Many were obsessed with finding flaws in her perfect little girl image. Some even doubted that her iconic curly hair was real, to the point where overly curious fans once tried to tug at her curls just to prove it. In her autobiography, Temple wrote that she actually wished her famous curls had been a wig because her real hair was a nightmare to maintain. To keep those soft, perfect ringlets, she had to follow a strict nightly hair routine, which included rinsing her hair with vinegar once a week. The acid burned her eyes and made them sting unbearably. Despite the exploitation and scrutiny, Shirley Temple single-handedly saved 20th Century Fox from bankruptcy. After each film, $115,000 of her earnings was placed into a trust fund, a sum that later grew to $335,000. Yet, she was only allowed to spend $13 a week. The rest supposedly kept safe by her parents. In reality, the truth was far darker. At the height of her fame, Temple earned up to $10,000 a week, making her the highest paid child actor in Hollywood. By the time she reached adulthood, she should have had around $32 million. But when she finally saw her bank account, there was only $44,000 left. The money from the year she smiled for America had been taken by her own father. Shirley didn't cry. She didn't scream. In her memoir, she simply wrote, "I felt neither disappointment nor anger." A short sentence, but one that cut deep, cold and haunting. No rage, no bitterness, only the calm strength of a woman who had already seen too many shadows behind the spotlight. Yet the darkness still wasn't done with her. At 17, Shirley met David O. Selznick, one of Hollywood's most powerful producers. A man the public saw as refined and charming, but behind closed doors, a predator. A friend once warned her, "If he's wearing silk socks, stay away." And indeed, when Selznick tried to grab her hand, Shirley looked down. The silk socks gleamed. The warning turned into a siren in her head. She tried to leave, but he pressed a button. The door locked. A room. A 7-year-old girl. A heavy-set man closing in. He smiled. She stepped back. In her memoir, she wrote, "I was faster than he was, and lucky to get away." She escaped the room, but not the memory. Not long after, another Hollywood big shot, a man she referred to only as the Wizard, tried to do the same. When she refused, he coldly said, "We have to learn to get along. It's just a workplace ritual." Shirley stared straight into his eyes and replied, without fear, "That might be in your contract, but it's certainly not in mine." That line became a quiet declaration for all the women silenced by the entertainment industry, a world where glamour could never hide the stench of P's corruption. But the tragedy didn't end there. At 35, when the world believed she was finally safe, George Jessel, a famous comedian, invited Shirley to discuss an important role. Once the door closed, his true nature emerged. He cornered her against the wall, but this time, Shirley was no longer the terrified 7-year-old girl. She fought back. With one swift, powerful kick, she brought him to his knees, his face contorted in pain. In her memoir, she wrote, "I saw pain, disgust, and hatred flash across his face, but I felt no pity." She was no longer a victim. She was a survivor. People often say that child stars rarely have happy endings, but Shirley Temple was the exception. She refused to let tragedy define her. After leaving Hollywood, she became a diplomat, the US ambassador to Ghana, and later to Czechoslovakia. The woman once seen as a porcelain doll now stood before world leaders, speaking of peace, dignity, and human rights. Looking back, Shirley once said a simple yet haunting line, "I never lost faith that there is still good in the world." In 1943, when she was just 15, Shirley Temple met John Eyre, the man who would become her first husband. 2 years later, they married. The wedding of America's little princess captivated the entire nation. They had one daughter, Linda Susan, and even co-starred in 2 films together, Fort Apache and Adventure in Baltimore. But behind the smiling photographs lay a quiet tragedy. Agar became an alcoholic, abusive, and unfaithful. The girl who had once made millions smile now lived in daily fear. After 5 years of suffering in 1949, she filed for divorce on the grounds of mental cruelty. She won custody of their daughter, though the emotional scars would stay with her for years. 2 decades later, when President Richard Nixon nominated Shirley Temple as US ambassador to the United Nations, the FBI conducted a background investigation. Shockingly, it was her ex-husband who tried to sabotage her. In his testimony, R fabricated claims that Temple was emotionally unstable and had extreme reactions when things didn't go her way. It was his final bitter attempt to take revenge on the woman who had left him. But truth always triumphs over lies. Ronald Reagan, a former colleague and longtime admirer, came to her defence, calling Shirley a woman of great courage and the highest moral integrity. Agar's accusations quickly crumbled, while Shirley Temple kept moving forward, head held high, unbroken and unafraid. After all the heartbreak, fate gave her a second chance. In 1950, at just 22, when her film career had faded, Shirley met Charles Black, a businessman and former Navy officer. Only 12 days after meeting, they married. That marriage lasted a lifetime, 55 years, quiet, scandal-free, and filled with love and respect. When Charles passed away, Shirley said he was the only man who ever made me feel truly safe. But the scars from her Hollywood past never completely healed. In her memoir, Child Star, Shirley recalled a horrifying moment when she was just 10 years old. While singing Silent Night live on CBS, a woman in the audience suddenly pulled out a gun and pointed it straight at her. The woman believed Temple had stolen the soul of her own daughter, a child who had died on Shirley's birthday. Thankfully, the gun didn't fire, and she survived. But the terror of that moment stayed with her for life. Temple grew up faster than any child should. While many of her fellow child stars fell victim to fame, she chose to leave Hollywood behind and dedicate herself to public service. From the little girl who sang on the good ship Lollipop to the US diplomat representing her country abroad, Shirley Temple became a living symbol of resilience and rebirth. Her life continued to test her strength. At 44, Temple was diagnosed with breast cancer. She became one of the first Hollywood stars to speak openly about the disease, encouraging women everywhere to get regular checkups. Through honesty and courage, she turned fear into power. She beat cancer and went on to live to the age of 85. A long, fulfilling life, though never an easy one. When she passed away in 2014, it was revealed that she had secretly smoked all her life, but had kept it hidden, afraid that children might imitate her. Her death from lung disease became her final reminder to the world. Even the strongest people carry their own private burdens. Shirley Temple remains an enduring symbol of grace and grit. The little girl who made America smile through its darkest days, and the woman who taught the world how to rise after being broken. Her life was like a film with no script, beginning in wonder, descending into darkness, and ending in light. Today, when people remember Shirley Temple, they don't just recall the golden curls or the radiant smile. They remember the brave heart that survived the shadows of Hollywood. She wasn't just the greatest child star of all time. She was living proof that sometimes the smallest flame can light up the entire world.